Ma'am, you're clearly lost. The Greyhound station is about 20 miles that way.
The words cut through the pristine air of Miami International Airport's private aviation terminal like a blade through silk. Captain Derek Hammond stood blocking the boarding stairs of a gleaming white Gulfstream G650, his arms crossed over his chest, 4 gold stripes catching the morning sunlight. His voice carried the kind of authority that had never been questioned in 25 years of flying the world's elite. The woman he was addressing didn't flinch. Maya Rodriguez Johnson, 34 years old, stood 5 feet 6 inches in worn Stanford hoodies and yoga pants that had seen better days. Her natural hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she carried a beat-up MacBook bag over her shoulder like she was heading to a coffee shop, not stepping onto a $12 million aircraft. "Excuse me." Maya's voice was calm, almost amused. She tilted her head slightly, as if she hadn't heard correctly. Derek's jaw tightened. In his experience, people who didn't belong on private jets usually had the decency to look embarrassed when called out. This woman looked patient, like she was waiting for him to finish making a fool of himself. "This is a private charter terminal." Derek continued, his tone growing sharper. "Commercial flights depart from the main terminal. You'll need to catch a shuttle." He gestured dismissively toward the distant terminals visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The private aviation lounge around them buzzed with quiet efficiency. Well-dressed passengers sipped champagne in leather chairs while ground crews prepped aircraft worth more than small countries' GDP. Everything was whisper quiet, marble clean, and exclusive. Derek had spent his career protecting this bubble of privilege. Maya took a step closer to the aircraft stairs. "I'm exactly where I need to be, Captain Hammond." She'd read his name tag, but her use of his name somehow sounded less like respect and more like she was filing information away for later. "No, you're not." Derek moved to block her path more completely. At 6 feet 2 inches, with the presence that came from commanding respect in cockpits around the world, he was used to people backing down. "This aircraft is reserved for Skyline Elite's VIP passengers. I don't know how you got past security, but what Maya's voice remained steady, curious even. She set her bag down gently on the tarmac. "What exactly are you assuming about me?" Captain Derek's face flushed slightly. He hadn't expected to be questioned. In his world, pilots were gods, and gods didn't explain themselves to people who clearly didn't belong. "I'm not assuming anything. I'm stating facts. This is a $15 million aircraft. Our passengers don't dress like they're heading to a college library." Behind Derek, Isabella Martinez watched from the aircraft's cabin door. 29 years old with kind eyes and a careful demeanor, she'd been a flight attendant for 6 years and had seen this kind of confrontation before. Never this blatant, but the undertones were familiar. Her hands gripped the doorframe as she debated whether to intervene. Captain Hammond Isabella called softly, her voice carrying a slight accent from her childhood in San Antonio. "Maybe we should check the passenger manifest first." Derek turned sharply. "Isabella, I know a passenger when I see one, and I know a security risk when I see one." He looked back at Maya. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one more time to..." "To what?" Maya interrupted gently. "To leave because I don't look like I belong here. To accept your judgment about my worth based on my appearance. To make this easier for you by just walking away." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Derek felt his authority being questioned in a way that made his military training bristle. 25 years of unquestioned command. 25 years of passengers looking up at those 4 stripes with automatic respect. And this woman in a hoodie was treating him like he worked for her. "You want to make this difficult." Derek's voice dropped to what Isabella privately called his intimidation register. "Fine. Security." He reached for the radio clipped to his belt. "Before we dive deeper into this explosive confrontation, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you've ever been told you don't belong somewhere because of how you look, this story is for you. What happens in the next 45 minutes will shock you, inspire you, and remind you that quiet dignity can move mountains. Hit that subscribe button, because this story about assumptions, power, and justice is just getting started. Back to our story. The morning had started routinely enough for Derek. He'd arrived at the Skyline Elite aviation hangar at 7 a.m., completed his pre-flight inspection, and prepared for what should have been a simple charter flight to New York. 3 passengers, the Morrison twins tech investors who flew with Skyline monthly, and 1 last-minute addition listed simply as M. Rodriguez Johnson. Derek hated last-minute additions. They upset his carefully orchestrated routine. He prided himself on knowing his passengers before they stepped foot on his aircraft. The Morrison twins were easy-money, quiet professional tipped well. But Mr. Rodriguez Johnson was a mystery, and Derek didn't like mysteries. When Maya had walked across the tarmac toward his aircraft, Derek's first thought was that she was lost. His second thought was that she was possibly dangerous. In his mental catalog of people who belonged in private aviation, Maya Rodriguez Johnson, in her Stanford hoodie and yoga pants, didn't compute. Miami Ground Control. This is Captain Hammond, Skyline Elite. Tail number, November. 7-4. To Lima. Derek spoke into his radio, his eyes never leaving Maya. I have a potential security situation at Gate 7, requesting immediate assistance. Maya watched him call security with an expression of mild interest, like she was observing an experiment whose outcome she already knew. She pulled out her own phone and typed a quick message, her fingers moving with the kind of speed that suggested she was very comfortable with technology. Who are you? Texting? Derek demanded. Your contact. Your handler. Maya looked up from her phone with raised eyebrows. My contact. Captain, what exactly do you think is happening here? I think someone who clearly doesn't belong on a private jet is trying to board my aircraft, probably with fake credentials or some kind of con. Derek's voice was getting louder, carrying across the tarmac. Other ground crew members were starting to notice the commotion. Tommy Sullivan. The ground crew chief looked up from his clipboard. 58 years old, with the weathered hands of someone who'd spent decades around aircraft, Tommy had seen every kind of passenger drama imaginable. But something about this felt different. The woman in the hoodie wasn't acting like someone who'd been caught doing something wrong. She was acting like someone who was waiting for something. Derek's really going at it? Murmured one of the younger crew members. Tommy frowned. Yeah, but look at her. Does she look rattled to you? Maya Rodriguez Johnson looked like a lot of things, but rattled wasn't one of them. She stood with the kind of stillness that suggested deep confidence, the way someone stands when they know something that everyone else doesn't. Captain Hammond. Maya said, her voice cutting through Derek's radio conversation. Are you absolutely sure you want to continue down this path? Derek finished his radio call and turned back to her. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm trying to save you from yourself. Maya's tone was patient, almost kind. But if you insist on making assumptions based on my appearance, that's your choice. The glass doors to the private terminal slid open, and Jake Morrison emerged, followed by his twin brother Ryan. Both 31, both successful tech entrepreneurs, both regular Skyline Elite passengers. Jake had the casual confidence of someone who'd never been questioned about his right to be anywhere, while Ryan carried himself with the careful precision of an investment banker. Morning, Captain Hammond. Jake called out cheerfully, then paused as he took in the scene. Derek standing aggressively close to a woman in casual clothes, Isabella looking anxious in the aircraft doorway, ground crew gathering at a distance. Everything okay here? Everything's fine, Mr. Morrison. Just dealing with a security situation. Derek's voice carried the satisfaction of a man who believed backup was arriving. This woman was attempting to board the aircraft without proper credentials. Ryan Morrison pulled out his phone reflexively, not to call anyone, but because the tension in the air felt like something that might need documenting. His generation had learned to record first and ask questions later. "Have you checked her credentials?" Jake asked, his voice carefully neutral. Derek's face reddened. "I don't need to check anything. I know who belongs on my aircraft and who doesn't." Maya smiled for the first time since the conversation began, and it wasn't a friendly expression. It was the smile of someone who'd just heard exactly what she'd expected to hear. "Your aircraft, Captain." "That's right. I've been flying for Skyline Elite for 25 years. I know this company, I know our passengers, and I know—" "What you know," Maya interrupted gently, is about to change dramatically. Isabella finally made a decision. She descended the aircraft stairs, her movement quick and purposeful. "Captain, with respect, maybe we should verify. Ms." She looked at Maya hopefully. "Rodriguez Johnson." Maya supplied helpfully. "Ms. Rodriguez Johnson's credentials before we proceed," Isabella finished. Derek turned on Isabella with the kind of fury that comes from having authority challenged by subordinates. "Isabella, you work for me. I work for Skyline Elite. She," he pointed at Maya, "does not work for anyone who matters. Now get back on the plane." Isabella's face went pale. 6 years of watching Derek humiliate crew members, 6 years of biting her tongue when passengers were treated unfairly, 6 years of pretending not to see the pattern of who got questioned and who got welcomed. Today felt different. Today felt like a line was being drawn. "Captain, I just think I don't pay you to think." Derek snapped. Maya's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. The patience in her eyes cooled by several degrees. "Captain Hammond, you just made your first mistake. Would you like to make a second one?" Derek laughed a sound with no humor in it. "Mistake, lady. The only mistake here is whatever scam you're trying to pull. But it ends now." In the distance, a white security vehicle was approaching, its yellow lights flashing. Derek straightened his shoulders, confident that vindication was moments away. Maya checked her watch, a beautiful, understated Patek Philippe that Derek didn't notice because he was too focused on her hoodie. "Right on schedule," she murmured. "What's right on schedule?" Derek demanded. Maya looked up at him with those same patient eyes. "Your education, Captain. Your very expensive education." The security vehicle pulled up beside them, and Officer Maria Santos stepped out. 35 years old, with 15 years in airport security, Maria had developed a talent for reading situations quickly. She saw an angry pilot, a calm woman, anxious flight crew, and passengers with phones out. She'd learned that the person recording was rarely the person causing the real problem. "Good morning," Maria said professionally. "I understand there's a situation here." Derek stepped forward immediately. "Officer, this woman is attempting to board a private aircraft without authorization. I need her removed from the premises." Maria looked at Maya. "Ma'am, do you have identification and boarding documentation?" Maya reached into her bag and pulled out a leather wallet. She handed over a driver's license and what appeared to be a boarding pass. "Of course, Officer Santos." She'd read the officer's nameplate just like she'd read Derek's. Maria examined the documents carefully. Maya Rodriguez Johnson, 34 address in Palo Alto. The boarding pass was legitimate Skyline Elite stock, properly formatted, seat assignment 1A. Captain Hammond. Maria said slowly, "These documents appear to be in order." Derek's face went from red to purple. "That's impossible. Those have to be fake. Look at her, officer. Does she look like a private jet passenger to you?" The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Maria's expression hardened slightly. 20 years of dealing with entitled passengers had taught her to recognize discrimination when she heard it. "Sir, I'm not sure what private jet passengers are supposed to look like," Maria said carefully. "Come on." Derek exploded. "You know exactly what I mean. Private aviation serves a certain clientele, people with class, with breeding, with standards. Not—" He gestured at Maya's outfit. "This." Jake Morrison's phone was now definitely recording its lens, capturing every word. Ryan had opened his livestream app, his finger hovering over the Go Live button. Both brothers had the uncomfortable feeling that they were witnessing something that would be replayed many times. Maya looked at Derek with what might have been pity. "Captain Hammond, you keep digging that hole deeper. Are you sure you want to continue?" "I'm sure I want you off my aircraft and out of my sight," Derek snarled. Maya nodded slowly. "Okay then, you've made your choice." She pulled out her phone again and dialed a number. The call connected immediately. "Elena." "It's me." "Yes, he's exactly as we expected. No worse, actually." Maya's voice was calm, almost conversational. "Implement Protocol 7. Full documentation. And, Elena, make sure legal is standing by." Derek tried to grab the phone. "Who are you calling?" "Who's Elena?" Maya stepped back smoothly, keeping the phone out of his reach. "Thank you, Elena. See you in 30 minutes. As Maya ended the call, Derek's radio crackled to life. "Captain Hammond, this is Marcus Rivera from Operations. Please respond immediately." Derek grabbed his radio. "Rivera, I'm dealing with a security situation. Can this wait?" "Captain, you need to stop what you're doing right now and step away from the passenger." Derek stared at his radio like it had grown wings. "What passenger, Marcus? There's no passenger here. There's a trespasser who—" "Derek, listen to me very carefully. Stop talking. Stop everything you're doing. I'm en route to your location now." The radio went silent. Derek looked around at the faces watching him. Isabella's anxious concern, the Morrison twins' uncomfortable fascination, Officer Santos's growing suspicion, the gathering ground crew's undisguised interest, and Maya Rodriguez Johnson, standing in her Stanford hoodie and yoga pants, looking like someone who was watching a movie she'd already seen, waiting patiently for her favorite scene. 43 minutes, Maya said quietly, checking her watch again. 43 minutes until what Derek demanded. Maya smiled, and this time it was genuinely kind. "Until you understand exactly who you've been talking to, Captain, and exactly how much this conversation is going to cost you." Maya Rodriguez Johnson hadn't always been patient with discrimination. That skill had been hard-earned, forged in the fires of a childhood that taught her the difference between reacting and responding. She was 12 years old when she first learned that some seats weren't meant for her. The flight from Oakland to Denver was her first time flying alone, a reward for being accepted to the National Science Foundation's Young Scholars Summer Program. Her grandmother had saved for months to buy that ticket, and Maya carried it like a treasure as she navigated the airport solo. The flight attendant's name was Carol, a thin woman with gray hair and tired eyes who looked at Maya's coach ticket and frowned. "Honey, you sure you're supposed to be on this flight? Where's your guardian?" "I'm flying by myself," Maya had said proudly. "I'm going to science camp." Carol's expression shifted to something Maya couldn't quite name. Science camp. "Well, aren't you special?" The words dripped with condescension. "Tell you what, sweetie. Why don't you sit in the very back, away from the other passengers? Some of them might find a child disruptive." Maya had complied, confused but obedient. It wasn't until later, watching a white boy her age sit comfortably in the middle section, chatting with passengers around him, that she realized disruptive hadn't been about her age. That night in her dorm room at science camp, 12-year-old Maya Rodriguez Johnson made herself a promise. Someday no one would ever again have the power to make her sit in the back because they thought that's where she belonged. Stanford University at 16 was supposed to be different. As the youngest person ever admitted to their computer science program, Maya arrived on campus carrying that promise and 4 years of high school robotics championships. She thought intelligence would be her shield against assumptions. Professor Williams looked at her code with obvious surprise during her first programming class. "This is quite sophisticated work, Miss Rodriguez. Did you have help?" "No, sir. I wrote it myself." Williams examined the elegant algorithms Maya had created to optimize database searches. "Really, your background didn't prepare you for this level of complexity. Are you certain you didn't consult outside sources?" Maya's background: her single mother who worked 3 jobs, her apartment in East Oakland, her high school that didn't have funding for advanced computers. Williams had made assumptions about what her background could produce, and exceptional code didn't fit his mental model. "I'm certain," Maya had said quietly. Then she wrote the next assignment in assembly language just to prove she could. 4 years later, graduating summa cum laude at 20, with 3 tech patents already filed, Maya had learned that being exceptional wasn't enough. Excellence would always be questioned when it came wrapped in the wrong package. Her first startup attempt came at 22. CyberGuard was revolutionary, AI-powered cybersecurity that could predict and prevent attacks before they happened. Maya had spent 2 years developing the core technology, sleeping 4 hours a night, living on ramen and determination. She pitched CyberGuard to 47 venture capital firms in Silicon Valley. 47 rejections each, with its own polite variation of the same theme. Impressive work, but we're looking for more experienced founders. The technology is interesting, but we have concerns about execution capability. Have you considered bringing on a more senior partner to lead the business side? Translation: they couldn't see a black woman in her early 20s as a tech CEO, no matter how revolutionary her technology was. The 48th firm was different. Rivera Capital was run by Elena Rivera, a Latina engineer who'd faced her own battles in Silicon Valley. Elena saw what the others had missed, not just brilliant technology, but the kind of focused determination that builds empires. "They all told you that you needed more experience," Elena had asked after Maya's presentation, among other things. Elena laughed. "I got the same feedback when I was raising money for my first fund. Apparently, I needed more experience in managing other people's money despite having made more money than most of them ever would." She leaned forward. "Maya, experience is just a code word for looks like us. Your technology doesn't need experience, it needs investment." Rivera Capital provided the initial $5 million. CyberGuard grew from Maya's garage laboratory to a 50-person company in 18 months. When Sony's systems were breached, despite their $100 million security budget, CyberGuard's AI predicted and stopped the attack before any damage occurred. The video of Maya explaining the save to CNN went viral, not just for the technology, but for the 24-year-old CEO who spoke with authority that belied her age. The acquisition offers started immediately. Google wanted the technology, Microsoft wanted the team. But it was Lockheed Martin who understood what Maya had really built. CyberGuard wasn't just software, it was a fundamental shift in how cybersecurity could work. $2.8 billion. The number had seemed abstract when Maya first heard it. She was 28 years old and suddenly had more money than she could spend in 10 lifetimes. But money, Maya discovered, was just the entry fee to a different kind of discrimination. The Palo Alto Country Club rejection letter was polite and bureaucratic. While your application was certainly noteworthy, the committee felt that your background might not align with our community standards. Community standards. Maya had founded 3 more companies after CyberGuard employed over 800 people and donated $15 million to STEM education programs. But community standards still meant something else entirely. That rejection sparked Maya's interest in aviation. If country clubs were still gatekeeping based on background rather than merit, maybe it was time to build something better. Private aviation was the ultimate symbol of access and exclusion, and Maya had ideas about how to change that. Rodriguez Johnson Aerospace Technologies started as a thought experiment. What if private aviation could be democratized? What if technology could make luxury air travel accessible to the communities traditionally excluded from it? What if someone who understood both discrimination and innovation could rebuild the industry from the ground up? Maya spent 3 years studying every aspect of aviation: aircraft, manufacturing, pilot training route, optimization, customer service protocols. She bought her first aircraft, a modest Citation, and hired pilots who shared her vision of hospitality without prejudice. The company grew quietly but steadily. Maya's approach was different from traditional aviation companies. She focused on emerging markets, on customers who had money, but not connections, on creating an experience where respect was standard rather than negotiable. By 34, Rodriguez Johnson Aerospace owned 42 aircraft and operated the fastest-growing private aviation service in the country. Maya's customer base included tech entrepreneurs, entertainment executives, and international business leaders who valued competence over connections. This morning's flight was supposed to be reconnaissance. Skyline Elite Aviation was hemorrhaging customers to competitors struggling with outdated processes and an increasingly poor reputation for customer service. Maya had heard rumors about discrimination issues about pilots who treated passengers differently based on appearance and assumptions. The acquisition offer Maya planned to present in New York was generous $850 million for a company worth maybe $400 million on a good day. Skyline Elite's leadership would be thrilled to sell to Rodriguez Johnson Aerospace, especially with their stock price declining and regulatory scrutiny increasing. Maya had wanted to experience Skyline Elite as a customer before becoming an owner. She'd booked the flight under her legal name, paid standard rates, and dressed exactly as she would for any casual trip. If Skyline Elite provided excellent service to a passenger in a hoodie, they were worth buying. If they treated her differently because of her appearance, well, that would tell her everything she needed to know about the company culture she'd be acquiring. Captain Derek Hammond was providing exactly the market research Maya had hoped for, just not in the way he intended. Derek's story was different, but equally revealing. Born in Columbus, Ohio, to a father who worked construction and a mother who cleaned houses, Derek had always understood hierarchy. His childhood was about knowing your place and respecting those above you in the pecking order. The Air Force had been his salvation and his education. 20 years of military service taught Derek the power of rank, the importance of protocol, and the satisfaction of unquestioned authority. Flying massive cargo planes into dangerous airspace, Derek had been responsible for millions of dollars of equipment and dozens of lives. Pilots were gods in the military, and Derek had thrived in that environment. Civilian aviation after his military retirement had been a culture shock. Commercial airlines treated pilots like expensive bus drivers, subject to corporate oversight and passenger complaints. Derek had lasted 2 years at Delta before the regulations and customer service requirements drove him to private aviation. Skyline Elite Aviation had been perfect for Derek's temperament. Private aviation passengers were supposed to be elite, wealthy, sophisticated, respectful of expertise. Derek could be the captain he'd been in the military, commanding respect and maintaining standards without interference from corporate bureaucrats. 25 years at Skyline Elite had reinforced Derek's worldview. He'd flown senators and CEOs, oil executives, and tech billionaires. These passengers understood hierarchy. They respected the stripes. They appreciated the exclusivity that Derek helped maintain. Derek's passenger interactions were usually pleasant and brief. A respectful greeting, professional service, minimal conversation. He knew his role and they knew theirs. The arrangement worked because everyone understood their place in it. Recent years had been challenging for Derek's sense of order. Younger pilots were being promoted faster, often with less experience but more modern training in customer service and communication. The aviation industry was changing, becoming more inclusive and less hierarchical. Derek felt like the rules he'd learned were being rewritten by people who didn't understand what made aviation special. This morning's confrontation with Maya Rodriguez Johnson represented everything Derek feared about the changing industry. Standards were being lowered. Appearance no longer mattered. People who hadn't earned their place in private aviation were demanding access anyway. Derek genuinely believed he was protecting something valuable, the exclusivity and standards that made private aviation worth the premium price. In his mind, questioning Maya's presence on his aircraft wasn't discrimination. It was quality control. Isabella Martinez had watched variations of this scene too many times to count. 6 years as a flight attendant had taught her to recognize the patterns which passengers got questioned, which got welcomed, which got the benefit of the doubt. Growing up in San Antonio as the daughter of immigrants, Isabella understood the weight of assumptions. Her father had worked construction, her mother cleaned houses, and Isabella had earned her aviation career through community college classes and weekend jobs. She knew exactly what it felt like to be judged by appearance rather than capability. But Isabella also knew the cost of speaking up in Derek's domain. Flight attendants who challenged pilots found their schedules changed, their performance reviews scrutinized, their job security threatened. Isabella had a daughter to support and rent to pay. She couldn't afford to make enemies. Today felt different, though. The woman in the hoodie wasn't behaving like someone who'd been caught doing something wrong. She was behaving like someone who knew something the rest of them didn't. And Derek's aggressive response felt more extreme than usual, more personal, more dangerous. As Isabella watched the confrontation escalate, she found herself facing a familiar choice: stay safe and silent, or risk everything to do what felt right. The Morrison twins had built their fortune on reading market trends and identifying opportunities before their competitors. Jake's meditation app had succeeded because he'd recognized the growing demand for mental health technology. Ryan's investment strategies worked because he could spot undervalued assets and emerging markets. Both brothers recognized that the scene playing out in front of them had the potential to become much larger than a simple passenger dispute. The woman Derek was harassing carried herself with the kind of confidence that suggested significant resources. Derek's aggressive behavior was being documented in real time. Whatever was happening here had the potential to impact Skyline Elite's reputation and stock price. The Morrison twins had also grown up with privileged private schools, Ivy League universities, trust funds that meant they'd never worried about money. They'd learned early that the world treated them differently because of how they looked and where they came from. But success in tech had taught them to value competence over appearance, innovation over tradition. Some of their most profitable investments had come from backing founders who didn't fit Silicon Valley's traditional mold. As Jake watched Derek's increasingly aggressive behavior toward Maya, he felt the uncomfortable recognition that he was witnessing the kind of discrimination he'd heard about but rarely seen directly. His finger hovered over the livestream button, knowing that his platform gave him the power to amplify whatever was happening here. Ryan was already calculating the potential fallout. If Derek was wrong about Maya's credentials, Skyline Elite would face a discrimination lawsuit at minimum. If this went viral, the company's reputation would be destroyed overnight. Either way, their regular flights with Skyline Elite might be ending soon. All of these histories and motivations were colliding on a Miami tarmac at 8:30 in the morning, creating the perfect storm for a reckoning that none of them could anticipate, but all of them would remember. Maya checked her watch again. 40 minutes remaining until Derek Hammond learned exactly how expensive assumptions could be. Officer Maria Santos had 20 years of experience reading situations, and the tension radiating from Captain Hammond felt dangerous. She'd dealt with entitled passengers before, but Derek's aggressiveness toward the woman in casual clothes was setting off every alarm bell in her professional instincts. Captain Hammond, Maria said carefully, "Ms. Rodriguez Johnson's documents appear legitimate. Perhaps we should verify her reservation through your airline's management. Derek's face contorted with frustration. Officer, I don't need to verify anything. Look at her. Does she look like she belongs on a $15 million aircraft? The question landed like a slap in the humid Miami air. Jake Morrison's thumb moved instinctively to his livestream button while Ryan began recording discreetly. Isabella Martinez felt her stomach drop as Derek voiced exactly what she'd feared he was thinking. Maya tilted her head slightly, studying Derek with the kind of clinical interest a scientist might show toward a particularly fascinating specimen. Captain Hammond, what exactly do I look like to you? You look like someone who found a boarding pass in the trash and decided to try your luck, Derek snapped. Private aviation serves a specific clientele. People with class, with breeding, with standards. Not... He gestured dismissively at Maya's Stanford hoodie, whatever this is supposed to be. Maria Santos felt her jaw tighten. 15 years of airport security had taught her to recognize discrimination disguised as procedure, and Derek wasn't even bothering to disguise it. Sir, I need to remind you that we don't profile passengers based on appearance. This isn't profiling, Derek interrupted. This is common sense. People like her don't fly private unless they're doing something illegal. People like her. The words hung in the air like a confession. Maya pulled out her phone again and typed a quick message. Elena, please add Captain Hammond's statements to the documentation file. Full quotes, time stamps, witnesses present. Derek tried to see what she was typing. Who's Elena? Your contact. Your handler. My assistant, Maya said simply. She's very good at taking notes. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been walking toward the terminal when the raised voices caught her attention. 42 years old, with the observational skills that came from 2 decades of emergency medicine, Elena immediately recognized the body language of a confrontation. The pilot's aggressive stance, the passenger's defensive but controlled positioning, the flight attendant's obvious distress. As a physician, Elena had learned to document everything. Suspicious injuries concerning behaviors, interactions that might become legal issues later. Her instincts told her to pay attention to whatever was happening here. Elena pulled out her phone and began recording, staying far enough away to avoid interfering, but close enough to capture audio. In her medical career, she'd seen too many situations where the absence of objective documentation allowed bad actors to escape consequences. Tommy Sullivan watched from his position near the fuel truck, his weathered face creased with concern. 58 years in aviation had taught Tommy to recognize pilots who'd let their authority go to their heads, and Derek Hammond was exhibiting every warning sign. Tommy had seen Derek's behavior toward ground crew over the years. The dismissive tone, the assumption that anyone wearing coveralls was automatically inferior, the way Derek treated maintenance workers like they were invisible. But this confrontation felt different, more personal, more dangerous. "Should we do something?" asked Jennifer, one of the younger ground crew members. Tommy considered the question. Derek technically outranked everyone on the tarmac, but Tommy had worked long enough to know the difference between legitimate authority and abuse of power. "Keep your distance, but keep watching," he told Jennifer quietly. "And if anyone asks later what you saw, you tell the truth." Back at the aircraft, Derek's frustration was reaching a boiling point. "Officer Santos, I'm requesting immediate removal of this individual. She's trespassing on private property, disrupting operations, and clearly doesn't belong here." Captain Hammond. Isabella tried again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe we should just check the passenger manifest." Isabella Derek's voice cracked like a whip. "You work for me. I work for Skyline Elite. She," he pointed at Maya, "works for nobody who matters. Now get back on the plane before you join her on the no-fly list." Isabella's face went pale. 6 years of careful professionalism. 6 years of swallowing her opinions to keep her job. 6 years of watching Derek humiliate crew members who dared to question his authority. Today felt like a line was being drawn, and Isabella was being forced to choose which side to stand on. Maya watched the exchange with growing cold anger. Watching Derek humiliate Isabella for trying to do her job professionally triggered something deeper than personal offense. Maya had built her companies on the principle that competence and character mattered more than hierarchy and appearance. Derek's treatment of Isabella violated everything Maya believed about leadership. Captain Hammond. Maya said, her voice carrying a new edge, "You just made your first real mistake." Derek laughed harshly. "Mistake, lady? The only mistake here is whatever scam you're trying to pull. But it ends right now. Does it?" Maya pulled out her phone again. "Elena, please also document Captain Hammond's treatment of his crew. I want a complete record of his management style." Derek's eyes narrowed. "Who exactly are you texting?" "Your lawyer, your social worker." The Morrison twins exchanged glances. Jake's livestream was now active, broadcasting to his 500,000 followers. The viewer count was climbing rapidly as people shared the stream drawn by the hashtag Private Jet Drama. Comments were flooding in faster than Jake could read them. Is this pilot seriously profiling a passenger? Someone's about to get sued into oblivion? I've flown private. They literally never question legitimate passengers like this. Plot twist: she owns the airline Ryan was taking. Detailed notes on his phone. His investment banker instincts recognizing the potential legal and financial implications of what they were witnessing. If Derek was wrong about Maya's credentials, Skyline Elite was facing a massive liability. Captain Ryan called out, "Maybe we should pause this conversation until Mr. Morrison." Derek interrupted. "Please don't interfere with security operations. I have this situation under control." Under control. Maya almost smiled at that phrase. Derek Hammond was about as far from having the situation under control as it was possible to be. "Officer Santos." Derek continued his voice, taking on the commanding tone he'd perfected during his military years. "I'm ordering this woman's immediate removal from the premises. She's disrupting operations, threatening crew safety, and clearly attempting some kind of fraud." Maria Santos had heard enough. 20 years in airport security had taught her to recognize both legitimate security threats and discrimination masquerading as procedure. Derek's behavior fell squarely into the second category. "Captain Hammond." "I need to be clear about something," Maria said firmly. "You don't give me orders. I'm not your subordinate, and I don't work for Skyline Elite. I work for airport security, and my job is to ensure passenger safety and civil rights compliance." Derek's face flushed an ugly red. "Civil rights. This has nothing to do with civil rights. This is about maintaining standards. Standards based on what criteria?" Maria interrupted. "Ms. Rodriguez-Johnson has provided legitimate identification and a valid boarding pass. On what grounds are you requesting her removal? On the grounds that she doesn't belong here." Derek exploded. "Look at her, officer. Look at how she's dressed. Look at her attitude. Does this look like someone who can afford private aviation? Does this look like our typical clientele?" The words spilled out of Derek like a dam bursting, 25 years of assumptions and prejudices flowing freely in front of witnesses, cameras, and an increasingly uncomfortable crowd. Maya listened to Derek's rant with the detached interest of a researcher gathering data. Every word was being recorded, documented, and preserved for the conversation she planned to have with Skyline Elite's board of directors. "So your criteria for passenger eligibility is appearance-based?" Maya asked conversationally. "You determine who belongs on your aircraft by evaluating their clothing and making assumptions about their economic status." Derek sensed a trap, but was too deep in his emotional response to avoid it. "I determine passenger eligibility based on 25 years of experience flying the world's elite. I know class when I see it, and I know when someone's trying to scam the system." "Interesting," Maya said, pulling out her phone to check her notes. So, in your professional opinion, I'm attempting to scam the system because I'm wearing casual clothes. Because you're wearing clothes that cost less than our catering budget. Derek shot back. Because you're carrying a bag that looks like it came from a thrift store. Because you have an attitude like the world owes you something instead of showing proper respect for the privilege of private aviation. Dr. Elena Vasquez, still recording from her position near the terminal, felt her medical training kick in as she watched Derek's behavior escalate. His body language was becoming increasingly aggressive. Clenched fists, invasion of personal space, vocal pitch rising. As an emergency room physician, Elena had seen this pattern before in patients experiencing what she professionally termed authority crisis events. Derek was spiraling, and Maya Rodriguez-Johnson was the catalyst. Isabella Martinez made a decision that would change her career trajectory forever. 26 years old, single mother, dependent on her Skyline Elite salary, Isabella had every reason to stay silent and avoid Derek's wrath. Instead, she pulled out her crew phone and began recording. Isabella Derek spotted her immediately. "What are you doing?" "Documenting a passenger interaction for quality assurance purposes," Isabella said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Company policy requires recording any incident involving passenger disputes." It wasn't technically company policy, but Derek didn't know that, and Isabella was betting her job that Maya Rodriguez-Johnson was exactly who she appeared to be, someone Derek should not be antagonizing. Derek's radio crackled to life. "Captain Hammond, this is Marcus Rivera from Operations. Please respond immediately." Derek grabbed his radio, grateful for what he assumed was corporate support. "Rivera, perfect timing. I've got a security situation at Gate 7. Trespasser attempting to board the aircraft. I need immediate backup." There was a long pause on the radio. When Marcus spoke again, his voice carried a tension Derek had never heard before. "Derek, I need you to stop talking and listen very carefully. Step away from the passenger immediately." Derek stared at his radio like it had malfunctioned. "Step away, Marcus, you don't understand. This woman is clearly not a legitimate passenger. She's dressed like a college student. She's being disrespectful to crew, and she's disrupting Derek." Marcus's voice cut through the radio with emergency-level urgency. "Stop talking. Stop everything you're doing. Do not say another word to that passenger. I am en route to your location." "ETA 6 minutes. The radio went silent. Derek looked around at the faces watching him. Isabella holding her phone camera steady. The Morrison twins obviously recording Dr. Vasquez, documenting from a distance. Officer Santos taking notes. Ground crew gathering to watch the spectacle. And Maya Rodriguez-Johnson standing calmly in her Stanford hoodie, checking her watch like she was timing something. 37 minutes, Maya announced quietly. 37 minutes until what Derek demanded, his voice cracking slightly. Maya looked up at him with something that might have been sympathy. "Until you understand exactly how much this conversation has cost you, Captain Hammond, and exactly who you've been talking to for the past 8 minutes. Jake Morrison's live stream had now reached 50,000 viewers. The comments section was moving too fast to read, but certain phrases kept appearing: career suicide, discrimination, lawsuit. This pilot is done, and ominously, someone needs to tell him who she is. Ryan Morrison was rapidly researching M. Rodriguez-Johnson on his phone, and what he was finding made his investment banker instincts scream warnings. Forbes articles, tech industry, profiles, acquisition announcements, net worth estimates in the billions. Captain Hammond Ryan called out urgently. "I really think you should, Mr. Morrison. Please remain silent unless you have information relevant to the security situation." Derek snapped his military bearing, still intact despite the growing chaos around him. Ryan looked at his brother meaningfully. Jake nodded and repositioned his phone to capture Derek more clearly. Captain Maya said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Would you like to know what I do for a living?" Derek's response came automatically shaped by 25 years of assumptions about who belonged in his world. I'm sure you're very successful at whatever it is you do. Customer service, maybe retail, food preparation. The crowd around them had grown silent. Even the airport noise seemed muted as Derek's words settled like stones into still water. Maya smiled, and for the first time since the confrontation began, it reached her eyes. Captain Hammond, I acquire airlines. Derek blinked the words, not quite computing. What I acquire airlines? Maya repeated patiently. I buy companies like Skyline Elite Aviation when they're underperforming, undervalued, or facing reputation challenges that impact their market position. Derek laughed a sound with no humor in it. Right. And I suppose you're here to buy us out. Maya checked her watch again. Actually, Captain Hammond, that meeting is scheduled for 11 o'clock this morning in Manhattan. Though after this conversation, I suspect the terms may need to be adjusted. The words hit Derek like a physical blow. Around them, phones captured every word, every expression, every moment of the realization that was dawning on Derek's face like a very ugly sunrise. You're lying, Derek said, but his voice had lost its conviction. Maya reached into her bag and pulled out a leather portfolio. She opened it to reveal official-looking documents with Skyline Elite's logo prominently displayed. Captain Hammond, meet your new owner. Jake Morrison's finger hovered over his phone screen as the viewer count on his live stream exploded past 75,000. Comments were flooding in so fast they were just a blur of text, but certain phrases kept jumping out. Oh my God, he has no idea, someone tell him, and most ominously, this is about to be legendary. Guys, Jake said quietly into his phone, addressing his audience while keeping the camera focused on Derek and Maya. I think we're about to witness the most expensive conversation in aviation history. Ryan Morrison was frantically scrolling through search results on his phone, and what he was finding made his investment banker instincts scream in alarm. Rodriguez Johnson, Aerospace Technologies. Founder and CEO Maya Rodriguez Johnson. Net worth $4.2 billion. Recent acquisitions. Stellar Aviation, Pacific Air Services, Mountain West Charter. Jake Ryan whispered urgently, showing his brother the Forbes article on his screen. Look at this. Look. Jake's eyes widened as he read the headline, Maya Rodriguez Johnson, the billionaire reshaping private aviation. He looked up at Derek, who was still arguing with Maya about the authenticity of her documents, completely oblivious to the corporate death sentence he was writing for himself in real time. Dr. Elena Vasquez had moved closer to get better audio on her recording. As an emergency room physician, she'd learned to document everything during crisis situations, and her medical instincts told her this situation was rapidly approaching critical mass. Elena had treated enough patients in authority crisis situations to recognize the warning signs. Derek's body language was escalating, deeper red in his face, more aggressive gestures, invasion of Maya's personal space. Meanwhile, Maya remained perfectly calm, like someone watching a natural disaster from a safe distance. This is going to end very badly for him, Elena murmured to herself, keeping her phone camera steady. Tommy Sullivan gathered his ground crew around the fuel truck far enough away to stay safe, but close enough to witness whatever was about to happen. In 58 years of aviation, Tommy had seen plenty of pilot meltdowns, but Derek's aggressive confrontation with a passenger felt different, more personal, more dangerous, more public. Should we call someone? Jennifer asked nervously. Tommy shook his head. Too late for that. This train's already left the station. All we can do now is watch it crash. Officer Maria Santos was taking detailed notes in her official incident report, but she was also recording audio on her personal phone. 20 years in airport security had taught her that discrimination cases often came down to precise documentation, and Derek's statements were providing textbook examples of bias-based passenger profiling. Maria had seen enough discrimination disguised as security concerns to recognize the real thing, and Derek's behavior was so blatant it was almost comical. Almost if it weren't for the genuine harm being done to the passenger and the crew member being intimidated into silence. Isabella Martinez continued recording with her crew phone, her hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding her organization. 6 years of watching Derek humiliate employees and passengers, 6 years of staying silent to protect her job, and finally an opportunity to document the behavior that everyone knew about, but no one had been willing to officially report. Isabella's daughter Sophia was 8 years old and obsessed with airplanes. Sophia dreamed of becoming a pilot someday, and Isabella had spent years explaining why that dream was important and achievable. How could Isabella look her daughter in the eye if she stayed silent while Derek destroyed someone's dignity based on appearance and assumptions? Captain Hammond Isabella said, her voice carrying new authority for the record. Ms. Rodriguez-Johnson has been entirely professional and respectful throughout this interaction. Derek whirled around. Isabella, you are one word away from being terminated. Do you understand me? Yes, sir, Isabella replied evenly. I understand exactly what kind of person you are. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Around them, cameras captured everything: Derek's shocked expression, Isabella's quiet defiance, Maya's approving nod. Meanwhile, Jake's live stream had become a viral sensation. Skyline. Shame was trending on Twitter. Private jet drama was climbing on TikTok, and aviation industry groups were starting to repost clips with increasingly alarmed commentary. Aviation today. If this is real, we're watching a pilot commit career suicide in real time. Travel industry news. Breaking Skyline. Elite pilot appears to be racially profiling passenger on live stream. Pilot discussion. 25 years of experience down the drain in 25 minutes. The viewer count hit 100,000. Jake's phone was getting hot from the processing demand, and his normally steady hands were beginning to shake as he realized he was documenting something that would be replayed for years in training sessions about how not to treat passengers. This is Jake Morrison, he said quietly to his audience. I want to be clear that we're witnessing what appears to be clear discrimination against a passenger based on her appearance and ethnicity. This is not okay. This is not how aviation should work. And I think this pilot is about to learn some very expensive lessons. Comments flooded in. Someone needs to tell him who she is. Maya Rodriguez-Johnson owns multiple airlines. This man just discriminated against a billionaire. Plot twist. She's about to fire him. Best live stream ever. Career suicide, speed run, any %. Derek was now examining Maya's portfolio documents with the kind of scrutiny he should have applied at the beginning of the conversation. The acquisition papers were legitimate Skyline Elite letterhead legal language financial terms that made his military pension look like pocket change. These could be fake, Derek said, but his voice lacked conviction. Anyone can print official-looking documents. Maya pulled out her phone. Would you like me to call Skyline Elite's board of directors? I have their personal numbers. You have their personal? Derek stopped mid-sentence as the full implication of Maya's words began to sink in. Maya's phone rang before she could dial. The caller ID showed Elena Rodriguez, assistant. Excuse me for a moment, Maya said politely, answering the call. Hi, Elena. Yes, I'm still at the aircraft. Captain Hammond has been very informative. Yes, please make sure legal is documenting everything. And Elena call. Arthur Pendleton directly. Tell him the acquisition timeline may need to be accelerated. Arthur Pendleton. Derek knew that name. Arthur Pendleton was the CEO of Skyline Elite Aviation, the man who signed Derek's paychecks, the person who could end Derek's career with a single phone call. You know Arthur Pendleton? Derek asked, his voice smaller than it had been all morning. Maya looked at him with mild surprise. Know him? Captain Hammond? I'm buying his company. Arthur and I have been in negotiations for 3 months. Today was supposed to be the final closing meeting. Derek's face went from red to gray. Around them, the camera phones captured every micro-expression as reality crashed into Derek's worldview like a freight train hitting a brick wall. But you're wearing a hoodie, Derek said weakly, as if clothing choice could somehow negate billions of dollars and corporate ownership. Yes, I am, Maya agreed patiently. I often wear comfortable clothes when I travel. I find that how I dress has very little impact on my ability to acquire and operate aviation companies. The live stream viewer count hit 150,000. Jake's phone was now being held by Dr. Vasquez, who had approached and offered to help with the technical aspects of documenting what everyone was starting to realize was a historic moment in aviation history. This is incredible, Dr. Vasquez said quietly to Jake. I've never seen someone destroy their own career so thoroughly and publicly. Ryan Morrison was now openly filming with his phone, no longer trying to be discreet. As an investment banker, he understood exactly what was happening from a financial perspective. Maya Rodriguez Johnson wasn't just a wealthy passenger Derek had insulted. She was about to become Derek's boss with the power to terminate his employment, revoke his benefits, and potentially blacklist him from the industry. Derek doesn't understand yet, Ryan murmured to his brother. He thinks this is about passenger rights. This is about corporate ownership. A black town car pulled up near the aircraft, and Marcus Rivera stepped out, moving with the urgency of someone trying to prevent a natural disaster. 45 years old, with the gray hair that came from 20 years in aviation operations, Marcus had dealt with plenty of passenger complaints and crew issues. But the phone call he'd received from Arthur Pendleton 15 minutes ago had been unlike anything in his career. Rivera. We have a situation, Arthur had said without preamble. Maya Rodriguez Johnson is at Gate 7, and Derek Hammond is apparently harassing her. Get down there immediately and stop whatever he's doing before he destroys the company. Marcus jogged toward the aircraft, his eyes taking in the crowd of witnesses, the phone cameras, the obvious tension around Derek and Maya. This was worse than Arthur had described. This wasn't just a passenger complaint. This was a public relations catastrophe happening in real time. Captain Hammond Marcus called out, his voice carrying emergency-level authority. Step away from the passenger immediately. Derek turned toward Marcus with relief. Rivera, thank God. This woman is claiming to be some kind of airline owner, but clearly she's running some kind of scam. Derek, stop talking, Marcus said sharply. Stop talking right now. Marcus approached Maya with the careful body language of someone approaching unexploded ordnance. Ms. Rodriguez Johnson, I'm Marcus Rivera, Vice President of Operations for Skyline Elite. I sincerely apologize for this situation. Can we speak privately? Maya looked at Marcus with interest. Mr. Rivera, I think privacy is passed as an option. Captain Hammond has made his opinions quite public. She gestured toward the cameras surrounding them. I think transparency is the better path forward. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, calculating the scope of the disaster he was trying to contain. A discrimination incident involving their most expensive aircraft, their senior pilot broadcast live to thousands of viewers, with the company's prospective new owner as the victim. Captain Hammond Marcus said carefully, I need you to understand something very important. Ms. Rodriguez Johnson is not just a passenger. She is the founder and CEO of Rodriguez Johnson Aerospace Technologies. She is currently in negotiations to acquire Skyline Elite Aviation. Today's flight was part of her due diligence process. Derek stared at Marcus like he was speaking a foreign language. Acquire. She's trying to buy the company. She's trying to buy the company. Marcus confirmed. Or rather, she was trying to buy the company. Before you spent the last 20 minutes publicly humiliating her, questioning her credentials, and making discriminatory statements that have been broadcast live to over 100,000 people. The number hit Derek like a physical blow. 100,000 people had watched him make assumptions about Maya based on her appearance. 100,000 people had heard him question her right to be on the aircraft. 100,000 people had witnessed him humiliate Isabella for trying to be professional. I didn't know, Derek stammered. Maya stepped forward. Captain Hammond, that's exactly the problem. You didn't know, and you didn't care to know. You made assumptions based on my appearance, my clothing, and your prejudices about who belongs in private aviation. The cameras captured every word, every expression, every moment of Derek's growing realization that his 25-year career was ending in the most public and humiliating way possible. Ms. Rodriguez-Johnson, Marcus tried again. Perhaps we could discuss this situation in a more private setting. Mr. Rivera Maya interrupted gently. Captain Hammond chose to make this situation public when he decided to humiliate me in front of witnesses and cameras. I think the public deserves to see how it resolves. Jake's live stream hit 200,000 viewers. The aviation industry was watching in real time as one of their own committed professional suicide, and the comments section had become a mixture of horror, fascination, and justice-seeking satisfaction. Ladies and gentlemen, Jake said to his camera, we are witnessing history. This is what accountability looks like when discrimination meets the wrong target. Maya checked her watch one final time. Captain Hammond, 30 minutes ago you told me I didn't belong on your aircraft. In exactly 5 minutes I'm going to own your aircraft, your company, and your employment contract. Would you like to revise any of your earlier statements? Derek opened his mouth, but no words came out. Around them the cameras waited. The witnesses watched, and the weight of 25 years of unchecked assumptions prepared to crush his career into dust. Maya checked her watch with the precision of someone who had scheduled this moment down to the minute. Captain Hammond, in exactly 3 minutes, you're going to receive a phone call that will change your understanding of this situation dramatically. Derek's radio crackled with nervous energy from the control tower. Skyline Elite 742 Lima. Please advise your departure status. Derek grabbed his radio automatically. Tower, we're experiencing a passenger situation. Stand by for departure clearance. Copy that, 742 Lima, 2. Be advised we have priority traffic inbound. Please expedite when ready. Maya smiled at the irony. Captain Hammond, I am the priority traffic. Before Derek could respond, his personal cell phone rang. The caller ID showed Arthur Pendleton, CEO of Skyline Elite Aviation. Derek had received exactly 3 personal calls from Arthur in 25 years, all of them involving commendations or major corporate announcements. Derek answered with the automatic respect he'd learned to show corporate leadership. Mr. Pendleton, sir, I'm currently dealing with a security situation at Gate 7. Derek shut up and listened carefully. Arthur's voice carried a tension Derek had never heard before. The woman you're harassing is Maya Rodriguez-Johnson. She is the founder and CEO of Rodriguez-Johnson Aerospace Technologies. She is worth $4.2 billion. And as of 9 o'clock this morning, she now owns 60% of Skyline Elite Aviation. The words hit Derek like bullets, each fact more devastating than the last. $4.2 billion, owns 60%. The woman in the Stanford hoodie wasn't just a passenger, she was his boss's boss's boss. Mr. Pendleton, I didn't know, Derek. She didn't want you to know. This was supposed to be an anonymous customer experience evaluation. She wanted to see how Skyline Elite treated passengers who didn't obviously display wealth and status. Arthur's voice was getting sharper with each word. Instead, you gave her a masterclass in discrimination, prejudice, and employee misconduct. Congratulations, Derek. In 25 minutes, you've single-handedly destroyed 25 years of company reputation building. Derek's knees nearly gave out. Around him, the cameras continued rolling as Jake's live stream audience watched a man's career die in real time. The viewer count had surpassed 300,000, with aviation industry executives, customer service trainers, and civil rights advocates all sharing the stream across social media platforms. "Sir, what? What should I do?" Derek's voice cracked like a teenager's. "Derek, there's nothing you can do. You're fired, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises, and your final paycheck will be mailed to your home address. Do not contact any Skyline Elite employees. Do not attempt to enter company property. Your pilot's license is under review with the FAA for discriminatory conduct violations." Arthur hung up. Derek stared at his phone like it contained a cancer diagnosis. Maya stepped forward, her voice carrying new authority. "Captain Hammond, I believe Mr. Pendleton has brought you up to speed on the situation." Derek looked at her with the shell-shocked expression of someone whose entire worldview had just exploded. You really own the company?" "As of this morning, I own controlling interest in Skyline Elite Aviation," Maya confirmed. "I acquired it as part of my ongoing expansion of Rodriguez-Johnson Aerospace Technologies. Today was supposed to be a routine customer service evaluation." Isabella Martinez felt tears of vindication welling up in her eyes. 6 years of watching Derek abuse his authority, 6 years of staying silent to protect her job, and finally someone with the power to hold him accountable had experienced his behavior firsthand. "Ma'am Isabella," said, approaching Maya with careful respect, "I want to apologize for Captain Hammond's behavior. This is not representative of Skyline Elite's values or training." Maya looked at Isabella with genuine warmth. "Ms. Martinez, you have nothing to apologize for. You tried to de-escalate this situation professionally. You suggested checking credentials before making assumptions. Captain Hammond chose to ignore your professional advice and intimidate you for doing your job correctly." Derek watched this exchange with growing horror as he realized that Maya had been observing not just his treatment of her, but his treatment of his crew. The intimidation, the threats, the public humiliation of Isabella, all of it captured on camera, all of it witnessed by his new owner. Marcus Rivera was frantically calculating damage control options, but the scope of the disaster was beyond anything in his experience. A discrimination incident broadcast live involving the company's new majority owner with their senior pilot as the perpetrator. There was no corporate communications playbook for this scenario. "Ms. Rodriguez-Johnson." Marcus tried desperately. "Perhaps we could discuss transition plans and personnel changes in a more private setting." "Mr. Rivera." Maya interrupted politely. Captain Hammond made his choices in public. I think the consequences should be equally public. Transparency builds trust, don't you agree? The crowd around them had grown as word spread through the private aviation terminal. Pilots from other airlines, ground crew members, passengers waiting for their own flights. Everyone drawn by the spectacle of watching a discrimination incident resolve in real time with immediate consequences. Dr. Elena Vasquez continued documenting everything for her own records, but also because she recognized the historical significance of what they were witnessing. As a Latina physician who had faced her own share of professional discrimination, Elena understood that moments of accountability were rare enough to deserve careful preservation. "This is extraordinary," Elena murmured to herself. 20 years of emergency medicine, and I've never seen consequences happen this quickly or this publicly. Tommy Sullivan gathered his ground crew closer to witness Derek's downfall. In 58 years of aviation, Tommy had seen too many pilots treat ground workers like they were invisible or incompetent. Derek had been particularly notorious for his condescending attitude toward anyone he perceived as lower in the hierarchy. "Boys," Tommy said quietly, "pay attention. This is what happens when someone finally has enough power to hold people like Derek accountable." Ryan Morrison was calculating the financial implications of what they were witnessing. As an investment banker, he understood that Maya's acquisition of Skyline Elite represented more than just a business transaction. It was a case study in how quickly corporate culture could change when ownership changed. Jake Ryan whispered to his brother, "Do you realize we just witnessed the most expensive customer service failure in aviation history?" Jake's livestream had become a cultural phenomenon. Skyline. Shame was trending #1 on Twitter. Private jet drama was exploding on TikTok, and aviation industry publications were already drafting headlines about discrimination in luxury travel. The comments on Jake's stream reflected a mixture of satisfaction, shock, and justice. "This is the most satisfying thing I've ever watched. Finally, someone with the power to hold people accountable. Derek just learned that assumptions are expensive. Maya is handling this with incredible grace. This should be mandatory training for all customer service. Plot twist of the century." Maya pulled out her leather portfolio again and opened it to a specific page. "Captain Hammond, I want to show you something. This is the customer service evaluation form I was planning to complete after today's flight." Derek looked at the form with growing dread. Professional appearance of crew, there was a checkbox. Respectful treatment of passengers, another checkbox. Bias-free service delivery, a third checkbox that felt like a knife in his chest. "Based on today's interaction," Maya continued calmly, "how do you think you scored?" Derek couldn't form words. The organized nature of his failure was becoming clear. This hadn't been a random encounter with an angry passenger, but a professional evaluation that he had failed in the most spectacular way possible. "Ms. Rodriguez Johnson." Derek managed to croak, I want to apologize." "Captain Hammond." Maya interrupted gently. "Apologies are for mistakes. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. You chose to make assumptions about my worth based on my appearance. You chose to question my credentials without evidence. You chose to humiliate your crew member for suggesting professional behavior. Those were conscious decisions, not accidents." Isabella stepped forward, her crew phone still recording. "Ma'am, for the record, Captain Hammond has exhibited this behavior pattern consistently. This incident is representative of his standard operating procedure, not an anomaly." Derek's face went white. "Isabella, you can't." "Actually, Captain Hammond, Ms. Martinez can and should document patterns of discriminatory behavior," Maya said firmly. "As the new owner of this company, I'm very interested in employee feedback about management practices." A second Blacktown car arrived and 3 people emerged, 2 women in professional suits and 1 man carrying a briefcase that screamed corporate lawyer. Maya's legal and business team had arrived to handle the transition logistics. Elena Rodriguez, Maya's assistant, approached with the efficient grace of someone who had handled countless corporate crises. 26 years old, but carrying herself with authority beyond her years, Elena had been managing Maya's schedule and priorities for 3 years. "Ms. Rodriguez Johnson," Elena said professionally, "the legal documentation is prepared. Mr. Pendleton is standing by for the transition call." And she looked meaningfully at Derek. HR has prepared the termination paperwork. Derek felt the walls of his world collapsing inward. Termination paperwork. After 25 years of service, he was being fired in an airport parking lot in front of hundreds of witnesses and thousands of online viewers. Elena Maya said, "Please also prepare a comprehensive review of Captain Hammond's personnel file. I want to know if this behavior pattern has been documented previously and what actions were or were not taken." James Murphy, Maya's corporate attorney, stepped forward with the measured authority of someone who had managed dozens of hostile acquisitions. 52 years old, with silver hair and the kind of expensive suit that suggested significant corporate success, James had built his career on handling complex business transitions. "Ms. Rodriguez Johnson." James said, "We're ready to proceed with immediate operational control transfer. All necessary documentation is in place." Maya nodded, then looked at Derek one final time. Captain Hammond, effective immediately, your employment with Skyline Elite Aviation is terminated. Your access to company property is revoked. Your pilot credentials are under review for discriminatory conduct violations. Security will escort you from the premises. 2 airport security officers approached their presence, making Derek's termination official and public. Officer Maria Santos supervised the process with professional detachment, but privately felt satisfaction that Derek's behavior was finally facing appropriate consequences. "This is what accountability looks like," Maria said quietly to her partner. 20 years in security, and I've never seen discrimination consequences happen this quickly." Derek looked around at the faces watching his professional execution, Isabella's quiet vindication. The Morrison twins' documented fascination. Dr. Vasquez's clinical observation. Tommy Sullivan's weathered satisfaction, and dozens of industry professionals who would remember this moment for the rest of their careers. "Please escort Captain Hammond from the premises," Maya said to security. As Derek was led away, his 25-year aviation career ending in the most public and humiliating way possible, Jake Morrison's live stream captured every step of his walk of shame. The viewer count had reached 500,000, making it one of the most watched discrimination accountability moments in Internet history. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jake said to his audience, "we just witnessed history. This is what happens when assumptions meet reality, when discrimination meets consequences, and when someone finally has enough power to hold people accountable for their choices." Maya watched Derek's departure with the calm satisfaction of someone who had seen justice served efficiently and publicly. She turned to Isabella, who was still holding her phone camera steady. "Ms. Martinez," Maya said, "how would you like to be promoted to Director of Customer Experience Training?" Isabella's eyes widened. After 6 years of being intimidated and undermined by Derek, the sudden offer of promotion and authority felt surreal. "Ma'am, I would be honored," Isabella managed to say. Good Maya smiled. "Your first assignment is to develop a comprehensive anti-discrimination training program for all Skyline Elite employees. What we witnessed today will never happen again under my ownership." The cameras captured everything: Derek's humiliating removal, Isabella's promotion, Maya's calm authority, and the complete reversal of power dynamics that had happened in less than an hour. Maya Rodriguez Johnson had boarded a flight as an anonymous passenger in casual clothes. She was departing as the owner of an airline, having provided the most expensive customer service lesson in aviation history. Within minutes of Derek's security escort from the premises, Maya's transformation of Skyline Elite began with the efficiency of someone who had acquired and restructured dozens of companies. She stood in the private aviation lounge, now surrounded by her legal team, Skyline Elite executives, and a gathering crowd of witnesses who understood they were watching corporate history unfold in real time. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maya announced to the assembled group, her voice carrying easily across the marble-floored space. "Effective immediately, Skyline Elite Aviation operates under new ownership and new standards. What you witnessed today with Captain Hammond represents the old culture. What happens next represents our commitment to dignity, respect, and professional excellence for all passengers and employees." Elena Rodriguez approached with a tablet displaying real-time social media analytics. Ms. Rodriguez Johnson, the live stream peaked at 600,000 concurrent viewers. Skyline's shame is trending worldwide, but public sentiment is overwhelmingly positive toward your handling of the situation. The aviation industry is calling it a masterclass in accountability and leadership. Maya nodded, then looked at Isabella Martinez, who still held her crew phone with steady hands, despite the magnitude of what she'd just witnessed and documented. "Ms. Martinez, I meant what I said about the promotion. Your courage in documenting this incident despite personal risk to your employment demonstrates exactly the kind of integrity we need in leadership positions. Isabella felt tears of vindication and relief flowing down her cheeks. "Ma'am, thank you. I have a daughter who dreams of working in aviation. I want her to grow up in an industry where character matters more than appearances, where respect isn't negotiable based on how someone looks. That's exactly the industry we're going to build," Maya promised. "Your daughter will inherit an aviation culture that values competence, kindness, and courage. The courage you showed today." Marcus Rivera, still processing the complete reversal of corporate structure that had happened in less than an hour, approached Maya with the careful deference of someone navigating new power dynamics. "Ms. Rodriguez-Johnson, how would you like to handle the operational transition? We have flights scheduled throughout the day. Mr. Rivera, operations continue normally," Maya said decisively. "Our passengers deserve excellent service regardless of internal restructuring. But I want all crew members briefed within the hour about new customer service standards. Zero tolerance for discrimination, immediate documentation of any bias incidents, and mandatory de-escalation training for all customer-facing employees. James Murphy." Maya's corporate attorney was already drafting press releases on his laptop. "Maya, we need to control the narrative quickly. The live stream has made this a public relations situation as much as a business acquisition. I recommend immediate transparency about our anti-discrimination policies and training programs." "Agreed," Maya said. "But James, I don't want this to be about public relations damage control. I want this to be about genuine cultural change. Schedule a company-wide meeting for tomorrow morning. Every Skyline Elite employee, from executives to ground crew, will attend anti-bias training within the next 30 days. Dr. Elena Vasquez, still documenting the proceedings from her medical professional perspective, observed the speed and decisiveness of Maya's response with professional admiration. In 20 years of emergency medicine, Elena had learned to recognize effective crisis management, and Maya was demonstrating textbook leadership under pressure. "Excuse me." Elena approached Maya during a brief pause in the corporate reorganization. "I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez. I documented this entire incident from a bystander perspective, as a Latina physician who has faced professional discrimination. I want you to know that your response today provides hope for accountability across industries." Maya shook Elena's hand warmly. "Dr. Vasquez, thank you for documenting everything. Independent witness accounts are crucial for understanding how discrimination operates and how to prevent it. Would you be willing to participate in our new training programs? Healthcare professionals often have unique insights into bias recognition and intervention." "I would be honored," Elena replied. "Discrimination thrives in silence. Today you made silence impossible." Meanwhile, Jake Morrison's live stream had become a phenomenon beyond aviation. Civil rights organizations were sharing clips. Business schools were analyzing the rapid corporate restructuring, and customer service trainers were preparing to use the footage in professional development programs. "This is Jake Morrison, still live from Miami International Airport." Jake addressed his audience, now approaching 700,000 viewers. "We just witnessed something unprecedented, immediate accountability for discrimination, with consequences that match the severity of the behavior. This is how change happens when victims have the power to enforce justice." Comments continued flooding in from around the world. "Maya Rodriguez-Johnson is my new hero. This should be mandatory training for every company. Finally, someone with enough power to hold people accountable. Derek just learned that. Assumptions have prices. Isabella deserved that promotion. This is what leadership looks like." Ryan Morrison was calculating the broader industry implications of what they'd witnessed. Jake, from an investment perspective, what happened here today will ripple through the entire private aviation sector. Maya just demonstrated that customer service failures can have immediate severe financial consequences. Every airline executive is going to be reviewing their discrimination policies tonight. Tommy Sullivan gathered his ground crew for an impromptu meeting near the fuel trucks. 58 years in aviation had taught Tommy the value of learning from other people's mistakes, and Derek's termination provided lessons that could benefit every employee on the tarmac. "Boys, pay attention to what just happened here," Tommy said seriously. Derek thought his pilot stripes made him superior to passengers and crew. He thought appearance determined worth. He thought his authority couldn't be challenged. Tommy gestured toward where Derek had been escorted away. He was wrong about all of it. Treat every passenger with respect regardless of how they look. Treat your coworkers with dignity regardless of their position. And remember that someone is always watching, always recording, always ready to hold you accountable for your choices. Jennifer, the younger crew member, raised her hand. "Tommy, do you think this will really change how things work around here?" Tommy looked toward Maya, who was efficiently coordinating with her legal team while simultaneously talking with Isabella about training program development. "Jennifer, that woman just fired a senior captain in front of hundreds of witnesses for discriminatory behavior. Yes, I think things are going to change dramatically." Back in the private lounge, Maya was conducting what amounted to a corporate restructuring meeting in real time. Elena Rodriguez had established a temporary command center with laptops, phones, and tablets managing the legal, operational, and communications aspects of the acquisition transition. "Elena, please contact Rodriguez Johnson Aerospace's head of human resources," Maya instructed. "I want our anti-discrimination training protocols implemented across all Skyline Elite operations within 60 days. Also, establish an anonymous reporting structure for bias incidents. Employees need to feel safe documenting problematic behavior without fear of retaliation." "Already in progress." Elena confirmed, her fingers flying across her laptop keyboard. "I've also scheduled interviews with all current Skyline Elite crew members who want to report their experiences with Captain Hammond's management style. Ms. Martinez won't be the only one with documented concerns." Marcus Rivera, still adjusting to the reality that his new boss was the woman Derek had spent 30 minutes humiliating, approached with operational questions. "Ms. Rodriguez Johnson, what should we tell other captains about the incident? Word is already spreading through the pilot community. Tell them the truth, Mr. Rivera." Maya said simply. Captain Hammond was terminated for discriminatory behavior toward a passenger and intimidation of crew members. Those behaviors are no longer tolerated under new ownership. Any pilot who has similar concerns about passengers based on appearance or ethnicity is welcome to find employment elsewhere. The statement was delivered calmly, but its implications were clear. Maya was establishing new cultural boundaries with immediate effect, and employees could adapt or leave. Isabella approached Maya with her crew phone, which contained hours of audio documentation from the confrontation. "Ma'am, I have complete recordings of Captain Hammond's statements and behavior. Should I forward these to your legal team?" "Absolutely," Maya said. "But Isabella, I also want you to think about how to use that documentation constructively. You're going to be developing training programs that help employees recognize and interrupt discriminatory behavior. Your recordings provide perfect examples of what not to do and how situations escalate when bias isn't addressed early." James Murphy looked up from his laptop where he'd been monitoring news coverage and social media responses. "Maya, the industry response has been overwhelmingly positive. Aviation Week is calling it a watershed moment for accountability in luxury travel. CNN Business wants an exclusive interview about discrimination in private aviation." And he smiled. Skyline Elite's stock price has jumped 12% since news of the acquisition broke. "The stock price increase is nice," Maya said, "but that's not why we did this. We did this because discrimination corrodes trust, damages employees, and ultimately destroys companies from the inside. Today was expensive for Captain Hammond personally, but it would have been much more expensive for Skyline Elite if we'd allowed that behavior to continue unchecked." Dr. Vasquez, who had continued observing the corporate transformation with medical precision, noted the difference between Maya's crisis management and typical executive responses she'd witnessed in healthcare settings. Ms. Rodriguez-Johnson, in my medical experience, most organizations respond to discrimination with denial deflection or delay. Your immediate acknowledgement and corrective action is unusual and effective. Dr. Vasquez, in my business experience, problems that aren't addressed immediately become crises that are much more expensive to solve later. Maya replied, Today's confrontation cost Captain Hammond his career, but it probably saved Skyline Elite from years of reputation damage and legal liability. Officer Maria Santos approached Maya with her official incident report completed. Ms. Rodriguez-Johnson, I've documented Captain Hammond's statements and behavior for potential regulatory review. In 20 years of airport security, I've rarely seen such clear-cut discrimination captured so thoroughly by witnesses and cameras. Thank you, Officer Santos. Will this incident be reported to federal aviation authorities? Yes, ma'am. Discriminatory behavior by licensed pilots falls under FAA oversight. Captain Hammond's pilot credentials will likely face regulatory review based on today's documented conduct. Maya nodded with satisfaction. Good. Licenses and certifications should reflect character as well as competence. The flying public deserves better than what Captain Hammond demonstrated today. The Morrison twins were preparing to finally board their aircraft, but Jake continued live streaming the aftermath of Derek's termination. Ladies and gentlemen, we're wrapping up what has become the most watched discrimination accountability moment in aviation history. In less than 2 hours, we've seen assumptions challenged, bias exposed, consequences delivered, and leadership demonstrated. Ryan added, From an investment perspective, what we witnessed represents the future of corporate accountability. Companies that tolerate discrimination will face immediate severe consequences when confronted by consumers who have the resources to enforce change. As the crowd began to disperse and normal airport operations resumed, Maya took a moment to reflect on the morning's events. She'd arrived at Skyline Elite, planning to evaluate their customer service as part of standard acquisition due diligence. Instead, she'd received a masterclass in exactly why the company needed new ownership and cultural transformation. Elena Maya said to her assistant, Please add a line item to the acquisition budget for comprehensive sensitivity training, bias, intervention programs, and employee empowerment initiatives. Today was expensive in terms of publicity and personnel changes, but it was a bargain compared to the long-term costs of allowing discriminatory culture to continue. Elena updated her tablet with the additional budget requirements. Maya, the media requests are increasing exponentially. Every major business publication wants to interview you about today's incident and your approach to corporate culture change. Accept interviews selectively, Maya decided. I want to focus on the constructive lessons rather than dwelling on Captain Hammond's failures. Today should be remembered as an example of how quickly positive change can happen when leadership commits to accountability. Isabella Martinez, still processing her promotion from flight attendant to director of customer experience training, approached Maya with questions about her new responsibilities. Ma'am, where should I start with developing the anti-discrimination training program? Start with today, Maya said simply. Use the recordings, the witness statements, and the documented escalation to create scenarios that help employees recognize bias and intervene appropriately. What happened with Captain Hammond should never happen again, but if similar situations arise, our employees should know how to de-escalate rather than enable discrimination. As Maya prepared to finally board her aircraft, now under her own company's ownership, she looked around at the transformed environment. Isabella was taking notes on training development with new authority and purpose. Marcus Rivera was briefing other pilots about behavioral expectations under new ownership. Tommy Sullivan was conducting an impromptu ground crew meeting about respect and professionalism. The change was immediate, visible, and promising. Maya's final statement to Jake Morrison's live stream audience captured the day's significance. Today wasn't about revenge or humiliation. Today was about accountability and consequences. Captain Hammond made choices based on appearance and assumptions. Those choices ended his career. But more importantly, those choices sparked changes that will protect future passengers and employees from similar discrimination. That's how progress works. One moment of courage, one decision to document truth, one choice to hold people accountable for their behavior. The live stream ended with 750,000 total viewers, but the impact of Maya Rodriguez-Johnson's discrimination intervention would continue reverberating through the aviation industry for years to come. 6 months after Captain Derek Hammond's termination became aviation industry legend, Rodriguez-Johnson Aerospace Technologies published its first annual report under the expanded portfolio that included Skyline Elite Aviation, now rebranded as Apex Elite Aviation. The numbers told a story of transformation that extended far beyond a single discriminatory incident at Miami International Airport. Customer satisfaction ratings had increased by 47%, employee retention improved by 62%. Most significantly, bias-related complaints had dropped to zero across all Apex properties, making it the first major private aviation company to achieve that distinction in industry history. Maya Rodriguez-Johnson stood in the conference room of her Palo Alto headquarters, addressing the quarterly board meeting with the same calm authority she'd demonstrated on that humid Miami morning. The wall behind her displayed real-time data from across her aviation network flight schedules, customer feedback scores, employee satisfaction metrics, and safety statistics that told the story of comprehensive cultural change. The Derek Hammond incident, Maya said using the phrase that had become shorthand in aviation circles for discrimination accountability, taught us that individual bias incidents reflect broader cultural issues that require comprehensive solutions. Our response has become a model for industry-wide reform. Isabella Martinez, now Director of Customer Experience Training for the entire Rodriguez-Johnson Aerospace Network, presented her department's annual results. At 30 years old, she had overseen the development and implementation of anti-discrimination training programs that were being adopted by airlines, hotels, and service companies worldwide. Our mandatory bias intervention training has reached over 3,000 aviation employees across 42 companies, Isabella reported. We've documented a 78% reduction in discrimination complaints industry-wide among companies that have implemented our protocols. More importantly, we've created a culture where employees feel empowered to interrupt bias when they witness it. Isabella's daughter, Sophia, now 9 years old, had attended several of the training sessions specifically designed for children and families. Sophia's dream of becoming a pilot had been reinforced by watching her mother lead industry-changing initiatives demonstrating that courage and competence could reshape entire sectors. Dr. Elena Vasquez had become a regular consultant for Rodriguez-Johnson Aerospace's training programs, bringing her medical expertise in crisis intervention and behavior modification to corporate bias prevention. Her documentation of the original Derek Hammond incident had become a case study taught in business schools, medical schools, and law enforcement training programs. From a behavioral psychology perspective, Dr. Vasquez explained to the board the immediate consequences delivered to Captain Hammond, created what we call accountability cascade effects throughout the industry. Other aviation professionals witnessed that discriminatory behavior could result in immediate career termination, which modified behavior patterns across the sector. The academic community had embraced the Derek Hammond incident as a watershed moment in understanding how privilege assumptions and accountability intersect in professional settings. Harvard Business School developed a case study titled Assumptions in Aviation Leadership Culture and Immediate Consequences. The Stanford Graduate School of Business created a course module called Corporate Culture Change Through Crisis Response. Maya's approach to the situation, calm documentation, immediate action, public accountability, and constructive reform, had been analyzed and replicated across industries beyond aviation. Hotels, restaurants, retail companies, and financial services firms had adapted Rodriguez-Johnson Aerospace's bias prevention protocols for their own operations. Tommy Sullivan, now 64 and serving as Rodriguez-Johnson Aerospace's Director of Ground Operations Training, had developed a reputation as one of the industry's most effective instructors for recognizing and addressing workplace discrimination. His weathered hands and decades of aviation experience gave him credibility with ground crews who might dismiss younger trainers. I tell every group the same thing Tommy explained to new trainees. Derek Hammond had 25 years of experience and 4 gold stripes on his shoulders. He thought his authority made him untouchable. But character matters more than rank, and respect isn't negotiable based on how someone looks. Maya Rodriguez-Johnson proved that assumptions have prices, and the bill always comes due. The Morrison twins had parlayed their documentation of the Derek Hammond incident into a broader platform for business accountability and social justice. Jake's livestream had been viewed over 50 million times across various platforms, making it one of the most watched examples of real-time discrimination intervention in Internet history. Ryan Morrison had shifted his investment strategy to focus on companies with demonstrated commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion. His investment fund, Morrison Capital Partners, required all portfolio companies to implement bias prevention training and establish anonymous reporting structures for discrimination incidents. The Derek Hammond incident proved that companies with toxic cultures are significant financial risks, Ryan explained to his institutional investors. Maya's immediate response protected Skyline Elite's valuation and probably saved the company from years of legal liability and reputation damage. We invest in leadership that prevents problems, rather than companies that ignore them. The Federal Aviation Administration had implemented new regulations requiring bias prevention training for all commercial pilots, directly inspired by the documentation from Derek Hammond's termination. The training included video scenarios based on the Miami airport incident, with actors recreating Derek's discriminatory statements and Maya's professional responses. FAA Administrator Patricia Williams announced the new regulations at a press conference that specifically credited Maya's leadership. The Rodriguez-Johnson model demonstrates how immediate accountability and comprehensive training can eliminate discriminatory practices in aviation. We're implementing these requirements nationwide because passengers deserve dignity regardless of their appearance, ethnicity, or economic status. Derek Hammond himself had become an inadvertent advocate for bias prevention training, though not by choice. His inability to find employment in aviation after his termination had led him to accept speaking engagements at training sessions where he discussed the personal and professional costs of discriminatory behavior. I destroyed 25 years of career progression in 30 minutes, Derek told audiences at mandatory corporate training sessions. I made assumptions about Maya Rodriguez-Johnson based on her clothing and ethnicity. I was wrong about everything: her identity, her resources, her character, and her power to hold me accountable. My prejudices cost me my career, my reputation, and my future in an industry I loved. Derek's presentations were awkward but effective, demonstrating the real human cost of bias and discrimination. Attendees left his sessions understanding that discriminatory behavior wasn't just morally wrong, it was professionally suicidal in an era of social media documentation and immediate accountability. Officer Maria Santos had been promoted to Director of Anti-Discrimination Enforcement for Miami International Airport, developing protocols that had reduced bias-related incidents by 85% across all terminals. Her documentation of the Derek Hammond incident had become training material for airport security nationwide. The Rodriguez-Johnson intervention showed us that discrimination doesn't require malicious intent, Maria explained to new security officers. Derek Hammond probably didn't wake up that morning planning to destroy his career. But his unconscious biases and unchecked assumptions led him to make choices that ended his aviation career forever. Our job is to recognize bias early and intervene before it escalates to that level. Maya's success in transforming Skyline Elite had attracted acquisition offers from major airlines interested in licensing her bias prevention protocols. United Airlines, Delta, American, and Southwest had all implemented modified versions of the Rodriguez-Johnson training programs, acknowledging that discrimination was both morally unacceptable and financially dangerous in an era of viral social media. The economic impact of Maya's approach extended beyond aviation. Companies across industries had calculated that the cost of comprehensive bias prevention training was minimal compared to the potential expenses of discrimination lawsuits, reputation damage, and employee turnover. The Rodriguez-Johnson model had become shorthand for proactive cultural change that protected both employees and corporate valuations. As Maya concluded her board presentation, she reflected on the broader significance of that morning in Miami. Derek Hammond gave us an opportunity disguised as an insult. His discriminatory behavior allowed us to demonstrate that immediate accountability could transform entire industries. Today, passengers across the aviation sector benefit from improved training, enhanced respect, and cultural changes that prioritize character over appearances. Isabella Martinez had one final statistic to share. We've received over 15,000 applications for positions across our aviation network in the past 6 months. Job applicants specifically mention our anti-discrimination policies and training programs as reasons they want to work for Rodriguez-Johnson Aerospace. We're not just preventing bias, we're attracting talent that values inclusion and respect. Maya smiled, remembering the 12-year-old girl who had been told to sit in the back of the plane because she might be disruptive. That child had grown up to own airlines, transform industries, and create opportunities for others who might face similar discrimination. Today's aviation industry is more welcoming, more respectful, and more professional because Derek Hammond made assumptions based on my appearance, Maya said. His failure became our foundation for success. Sometimes justice arrives exactly when it's needed most. As the board meeting concluded, Maya walked to her office window overlooking the tarmac at Palo Alto Airport, where a dozen aircraft in Rodriguez-Johnson Aerospace livery prepared for flights across the country. Each plane carried crews trained in bias prevention passengers who could expect dignified treatment regardless of their appearance and the legacy of a confrontation that had changed an entire industry. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Isabella Sophia's school is doing a unit on civil rights leaders. Her teacher asked if she knew anyone who had stood up for justice. Sophia said, "My mom works for someone who bought an airline to fire a racist pilot. I think she understands the lesson." Maya texted back. The lesson is that quiet dignity defeats loud prejudice every time. Your courage in documenting Derek's behavior protected future passengers from similar discrimination. That's the real victory. The Derek Hammond incident had taught the aviation industry that assumptions about passengers based on appearance or ethnicity weren't just morally wrong. They were professionally catastrophic in an era where accountability could arrive instantly and consequences could be permanent. Maya Rodriguez-Johnson had boarded a flight wearing a Stanford hoodie and casual clothes. She had disembarked as the owner of an airline and the architect of industry-wide cultural change that would protect passengers and employees for generations to come. Character, as it turned out, wasn't something you could see in a hoodie, but it was something you could measure in the moment when dignity was tested and justice was demanded. Maya had passed that test with quiet strength, immediate action, and a commitment to ensuring that no one else would face the discrimination she had experienced. The legacy of that humid Miami morning lived on in every respectful passenger interaction, every bias intervention by empowered employees, and every aviation professional who remembered that assumptions have prices and the bill always comes due. If you've ever been underestimated because of your appearance judged by assumptions instead of character, or told you didn't belong somewhere, this story is for you. Share your own experiences in the comments below because every voice matters in building a world where dignity isn't negotiable and respect isn't determined by how someone looks. What happened to Derek Hammond should serve as a reminder to all of us that our actions have consequences, and in today's connected world, those consequences can arrive faster and more publicly than ever before. Maya Rodriguez Johnson didn't just buy an airline that morning. She bought the power to ensure that discrimination would no longer be tolerated, ignored, or forgotten. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about quiet strength, defeating loud prejudice, and remember, true power isn't about raising your voice or wearing the right uniform. It's about using your position to lift others up and ensure that justice isn't just an idea, it's a practice that protects everyone. Don't forget to hit that like button if this story moved you. Share it with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't determined by other people's limitations. And ring that notification bell so you never miss stories that prove dignity always wins in the end. Thanks for watching, and remember, assumptions have prices, but respect is always free to give. Make sure you're on the right side of that equation.